Artie, what's your question tonight on active life tennis?
Oh, hi. I was in an accident not too long ago. I was hit by a big Milhouse truck. I'm in physical therapy now for a couple months, and the majority of my friends, or the silent majority of my friends, are still involved in tennis and stuff like that. And I was never a great player, but now I want to see how I can overcome this handicap in order to and still, be able to play.
Well, what exactly happened?
I was a passenger in a van that was struck by a truck.
Lindenhurst is a village of 27,000 on the south shore of Long Island, New York. These are the people who grew up there and their stories. Everyone I know is from Lindenhurst.
Summer's winding down, so getting ready for like another 10 months of winter.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty good though. I like Chicago a lot. It's comfortable, has its problems like any city, but
Sure.
it's I've been a lot happier here since I moved here in 2010.
It's on my short list for future moves. I have a lot of friends up there now.
You planning on moving?
Eventually, again, yeah. But we'll
Cool.
see.
Where do you live now? Are you still in
I'm,
Long
I'm
Island?
I'm back in Lindenhurst for now. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. I like a smaller city that caters to my limited interests. Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, when I left New York, I was like, I had like or leading up to the time I left, I was like Salt Lake City, Seattle. Like I was kind of casting a wide net, like Arizona. I was like, I could live anywhere. And then it just sort of my career sort of brought me here, and I was like, okay. And then met my wife. Well, she became my wife. And then just that's it. This is probably where they'll bury me.
yeah. Well, we'll get to that, but first we want to hear about
We will.
your roots in Lindenhurst.
Yeah. Is this going? Are we
Yeah,
recording?
we're rolling.
We're going.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
Well, shit. Where should I start? I guess. So we're talking about Lindenhurst.
Mhm.
Um, sorry, I'm like, it's been a long day and I'm kind of like wiped out. So you're getting me at a low energy moment. But maybe that'll be good. Maybe I'll be less hyper. I moved to Lindenhurst when I was in third grade. The way it came about was I was born in Copiague, or I was born in Brunswick Hospital, which is not there anymore, I guess.
Nope.
Correct.
It's a
Wild.
giant apartment complex now.
That's wild. That's like where my dad died, and like that's like where I was born, where my sister was born. That's crazy that it's not there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was born there. My family was living in Copiague, and I guess at about well, it was tumultuous up until about kindergarten, and then my mom left my dad. We moved to Florida, and then became like this weird period of like moving back and forth between Florida and New York, where I don't really have a good chronological sense of when and where and how and why. But it was like a lot of back. I was very young, so from like 5 to about I'd say like 10. I was back shuttling back and forth between Florida for a period of time. I was living in Islip. We spent some time living with my grandmother in Copiague. It was all very like chaotic, and then eventually we ended up moving into well, my dad. I was living with my dad and his girlfriend, and they rented a house on Strongs Avenue, right across the border from Copiague. So the school district found out, and they were like, "You can't keep going to." I was going to like Susan E. Wiley School in Copiague, and they're like, "You can't keep going here. You have to go to you have to change schools." And I had already changed schools like way too many times for a kid that age. But I was like, okay, I'm just changing schools again. So I ended up having to go to Westgate's Elementary,
Okay.
and that started in third grade, like halfway through third grade. And then from then on, I stayed in Lindenhurst until I graduated. But we moved within Lindenhurst. I should have probably thought about this before we did this call because now I'm going to be thinking as I'm talking. But it's like we lived. I went to Westgate's, Daniel Street, and Allegheny elementary schools. And for each one of those schools, I lived in 2 to 3 different houses. Like we were constantly getting like evicted, bounced out of this house, or my dad would leave his girlfriend, or I'd get my mom would get custody and I'd live with her. And it was like it was all very like I never really knew what was going on. My head was always spinning. I was always the new kid in school.
Yeah.
So I spent like third grade and fourth grade and part of fifth in Westgates, and then like fifth briefly in Daniel Street, and then like sixth, and then until junior high I was in Allegheny, and then went to. Is the junior high still there? Do they still have like a
Yeah.
separate?
Yes.
But when you were there, it was only 7th and 8th grade at the time.
Yeah. What is it now? Sixth, seventh, and eighth?
Sixth, 7th,
Correct.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what our school district is like here, where my kids goes. It's like or it might be like it's either sixth, seventh, and eighth, or seventh, eighth, and ninth. I'm not sure, but yeah. So that's another reason why I'll never move. I don't want my kids to go through what I went through. They're going to grow up with the same neighborhood and the same friends.
Yeah.
And kind of put down, you know. So yeah, so that was kind of like my journey through Lindenhurst in that time period. And my sister was born at some point, and she went to Rawl. Rawl's not there anymore, right?
It is.
Still there. Yeah.
Still there. Yep.
What's the school that's not there?
Bauer.
Bowers?
Bauer, it's still standing, but it's not open. Yeah.
Yeah, I think she went to Rawl and Bauer, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
So Bauer was the one on Montauk Highway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's when I was in high school. She was going to Bauer. So I would, and I was living down on like Shore Road, way down by the fucking whatever you want to call that body of water over there.
Yeah. You were a bay rat for a while. That's what they call them.
Yeah, but not in the nice area of the bay. It was like the shitty part.
There's one nice block, and that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah.
I remember the year my mom moved to California when I was 17. She decided to go and like try to start over out there. So but the year she moved, I still had like 6 months left of high school, of 12th grade. So she was like, I'm going to move, and then you can either come out and live with me in California and I was going to go to UC Davis and whatever, and or you can stay here and like get a job. And I was like, I'm fucking done. I'm staying here and getting a job. Like I'm done with getting shuttled around all over the place with my parents. So I ended up moving in with Artie Shepherd at that point in Belmore. But the month she moved away, there was like a huge hurricane. It wasn't. It was years after Gloria. I don't remember which hurricane it was, but the whole thing was flooded. So she moved out, and my whole house flooded. Where
Was that Hurricane Bob?
Maybe. Yeah, it would have been 92. So whatever that was, it might have just been a storm, and maybe it was just like shitty.
I think Bob was a little before that. Yeah.
Maybe.
Hugo.
So, what's that?
Oh yeah, Hugo. I forgot about Hugo.
Hurricane Hugo.
Yeah, it could have been Hugo. There's so many. Gloria was the big one from when I was a kid. I think I was in like 6th or 5th grade when Gloria hit, and like trees are down all over the place. At that point, I was living on South 2nd. And one of my mom's dirtbag friends like came over with like a bunch of car batteries, and we hooked up like the TV and lights to jumper cables to car batteries, and that's how we played. Like we had no power for like a week and a half or something. So yeah, we were like, it's like Road Warrior style.
It's worth it to have someone like that around. Huh?
Yeah,
you do
the
that.
thing about drug addicts is that they're very, very resourceful.
Resourceful,
people, so, yeah. As long as they have a supply of drugs, you can make use of that resourcefulness. Otherwise, it'll be used against you. So I probably just jumped around a little bit, but I don't know if you want anything in that period that you want me to go over.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask, like, despite bouncing around, like, what were you getting into? Obviously, was it more of like an introversion thing, like comic books and movies, and kind of keep it to yourself?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the dark. I was like very. I wasn't like I am now. I was not social. I didn't like to interact. All my interactions with people ended poorly. And I was always the new kid in school, so I was always bullied.
Yeah.
I was always like kind of like never felt right, and I was always embarrassed about whatever living situation I had going on at home. So I never really wanted to make friends or anything like that. And then every school I went to, I just got picked on, just like relentlessly. I made like 2 friends that I managed to bond with over comic books and Dungeons and Dragons and shit like that. And they were both like, and they had their own problems too. So it was like kind of bonded over that. Like, yeah, your family's fucked up, my family's fucked up, so whatever. And it was very like River's Edge, Stand By Me, not that dramatic, but kind of like grimy. Uh, um, so I was really into comics. To this day, I'm still into comics. There was a brief period where I sort of didn't. It was like, oh, I'm going to put away the comics, and I sold all my comics in like '98 because I was like, and I got tattoos with the money and stuff like that. And I thought I was like, I'm a grown up now, and then I realized like I'm always going to be this person. So I just got back into comics. Now I have a garage full of comics. But stuff like that, like I was like science fiction and Dungeons and Dragons and all that. That's what I was getting into. I've told the story a few times. My mom had a friend he was a sort of a quote unquote family friend, and I think he met my mom through selling pot to my mom and various other drugs, and he was like very old school punk rocker. And I just thought he was this cool guy who had like a mohawk, and I thought he was like a weird guy. It was funny, but he would drive us to school or drive us places or just like babysit us. And he was like, you know, not a babysitter that you would want. But a very cool guy. And then he had like Dead Kennedys tapes, Circle Jerks tapes, Butthole Surfers tapes in his car. And I started borrowing them and listening to them just because they were so outrageous sounding. And then that was kind of my gateway into like, this is funny, but it's also scary, but it's also cool. And once I tapped into that, I started picking up cues from other people. And this would have been like ninth grade. So I was already in high school. So I was exposed to a wider body of people, and I would see like t-shirts and things like that. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's from this album, and that's this thing, and that's the symbol of that band. And and that kind of, and then, and I started sort of aping that or putting out my own signals, I guess. It's very like, caveman-esque. And then I made friends with those kids and kind of grew socially that way and learned how to interact with people. And something in around 10th grade kind of flipped in me. And there's not many people that I still know from before that era that are like still around. Like Rich would have been one, and some other kids, but they would probably attest to the fact that like, I kind of flipped and I kind of became overly outgoing, and like I wanted attention and I sought out attention, and I was like compensating for something. So I was always like getting into trouble, starting shit, being the class clown, being, hitting on girls, whatever it was. And that became kind of my persona for a while. Maybe until like I was like in my 30s.
So you're kind of like what they would call an edgelord now?
Yeah, I mean, before that was a term, I embarrassingly, that was probably it. It was like whatever I could do that would cause a problem or would be antithetical to whatever was going on. I wanted to do that. And then I would like, my favorite bands were like Sheer Terror and SFA and Born Against, and anything that was like rubbing the fur the wrong way. I was like, that's what I want. And there's still a part of me that like loves transgressive art and music and things like that. But that was, that sort of aspect of it came out where like, well, I can't seem to get the attention that I need, so I will manufacture these occasions to get attention that, it's like I can't get a meal, so I'll eat a candy bar. It was that kind of mentality. And I'm 49 and I have self-awareness. So now if I have a magic time machine, I could go back and kind of help my younger self, but here I am.
Luckily, no social media back then.
Yeah, I mean, thank God. I would have. I don't know what.
Well, I was going to ask, and the answer is probably no. But did you grow up religious at all?
No, my mom went in and out of. During the periods I lived with my mom, she went in and out of Catholic phases. So I went to OLPH occasionally. I did catechism. I had the Saturday morning school, and that kind of thing. But on and off, like, and then if my mother would kind of get into something else, then it would kind of fall by the wayside. But never when I lived with my dad, it was kind of just like survive, watch TV. TV was my babysitter. But my mom, I remember one time when she was feeling ultra Catholic, she all I wanted out of life was to see Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. It was all I wanted. It was all I could think about. I knew it was a movie that was out. It was at the Lindenhurst Theater. it was my
Near the end of its run, probably just
yeah.
about to go
Oh
on to
yeah, of
VHS.
course.
Yeah.
To me,
Yeah.
I had no idea, but I was like, it's finally at the Lindenhurst movie theater. It's like where I
Mhm.
live. But my dad had taken me. One of the only good things my dad ever did in my life was take me to see the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is to this day one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie. So Indiana Jones was like, gotta see this movie. And we go to church one day. Here I go to church again, I guess. And the pastor, the priest, whatever, at the end of the service, they would always be kind of like a topical thing, like
Yeah.
whatever the fuck is going on, and then I'm gonna riff about it and connect it to the Bible. I would have made a great priest. I wish I would have. That would have been. I could have done it. All I liked was belief. He gave a big speech, an anti Temple of Doom speech, where he was
Oh
like,
no.
"Yeah, he's like, don't see this. It's satanic. It's got all this imagery, and it's really bad for kids. There's too much stuff, and it went off for like the full 15 minutes. It was all about Temple of Doom, and we left, and my mom's like, "You're never going to see that movie." Like, I was shattered. So if there's any part of me that ever wanted to kind of find God, that destroyed it. So I'm like, God hates
Yeah.
Temple of Doom for me.
I was going to say, like, knowing your artistic output later on,
Oh
there's a
yeah,
lot of that.
yeah. That was my first sort of clue that like this is all bullshit. So the next time I had to walk to. We lived on Hoffman Avenue at that point, right by the tracks, and I had to walk from there to OLPH to go to my Saturday, whatever the fuck,
CCD.
you know,
Yeah.
right, like training for communion. Or at that point, it would have been confirmation. I made my communion, never made my confirmation, but I had to walk there with a friend, and we both looked at each other and we're like, we can just keep walking and go to the movie, and and we just did that. We saw it by ourselves in the Lindy Theater for $1. Fucking ruled. Why did I start telling that story? I don't remember. Oh, religion.
Yeah, I was asking you about religion. I got my answer. It was
Yeah,
good.
yeah,
But okay, so you said around ninth grade is when you start kind of discovering underground music, and that's really what you latched onto as far
yeah,
as like your social scene, and you start meeting people in high school who would later become the Long Island scene.
yeah, yeah. I met like one of my earliest friends was John LaFata. He was a grade below me, and George Reynolds, who's a grade above me. So those two, Derek Schilling, who was like before I got into punk rock, like in junior high, so I would see him around and I'd be terrified of Derek. He had like these crazy patches all over his jacket. It was like had long hair, and it just looked terrifying to a young kid. And then he became one of my best friends. So yeah, a lot of people like that, and and just started like finding out about like, oh, you can go to this show, that show. Oh, my friend Shannon and her sister Heather, who I briefly dated, we went to. She's like, oh, we're gonna go see the Dead Milkmen, and I knew them from Punk Rock Girl was like the big single at the time, and I'm like, oh, I'll go see that. And I had been to see like, the B-52s and Public Image Limited and stuff like that. I had gone to their concerts at like Jones Beach, and I was like, I'll go see Dead Milkmen, and I just pictured something like that. And she's like, all right, and we go there, and it's at Stony Brook University, and she's like, make sure you stand towards the back. Don't go in the pit. And I'm like, oh my god, what is the pit? I pictured a literal pit where for some reason, like it was like a treacherous thing. The building that was like dangerous. And I'm like, she's like, no, that's where people slam dance. And I'm like, people don't really do that. That's stupid. I had seen it in like 21 Jump Street or something like that. It's like that's and sure enough, I got caught. I got caught in a mosh. I got caught in the pit, and
Nice.
I was like, but I had a blast. I had such a great time. At one point during that show, I almost got completely trampled because I didn't know what I was doing. I was running around. I think I had at the time I might have had like a leather jacket with like Born Against painted in paint marker down the sleeve, and like my hair like spiked up in a mohawk or something dumb. And I get knocked down. Who pulls me up? But Jim Haight, who you must have heard of at this point.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And he pulls me out, him and his friend Norm. uh, Later of Texas is the Reason, pull me out, and they're like, are you okay? Whatever. And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, it's cool, just stand over here, you'll be fine. And like they were like these older punk rock skinheads that I was like, wow, just met these guys. And then a couple of months later, time is kind of like confusing to me when I look back, but I have a very blurry memory. But we were at the Busy Bee Mall. It's fun to talk about this stuff because nobody that I socialize with now has any idea what the fuck the Busy Bee Mall is, you know.
Right.
Mhm.
So
Everybody who listens to this will.
sure,
So,
of course,
yeah.
niche audience.
Yeah.
I was at the Busy Bee Mall with this kid John Lydon, who later went on to become like he flipped and became like totally conservative and weird and joined like the Marines or something. But at the time, he and I were like inseparable. Not John Lydon, the Public Image Limited singer.
Not Johnny Rotten. Yeah.
Very differently, yeah. But he had like long hair and like peace signs all over his jacket and stuff. And we were both like total outcasts. So we were like at the Busy Bee Mall at the Casbah, which was the one booth that you could buy punk patches and shirts and stuff like that. And there was that was half of the reason we went. The other half was that the girl who ran it was like insanely hot goth girl. So we would go there and kind of look at the t-shirts and just talk to her and kind of like stare longingly. So we're at the Busy Bee Mall doing that. And these fucking dudes from these Lindy Bulldog kids walk in and they're just like, you fucking freaks. Like, look at you. You're looking at your freak shit. And they're like they're going to beat us up in the mall. At one point, no, they were like, we'll wait for you outside. We'll wait for you outside, you fucking freaks. And we're just like, dude. And then who comes out of nowhere but Jim Haidt and
Wow.
Norm. Norm, at the time, Norm Crucified, full skinhead gear, just walks up and they're like, are these fucking kids bothering you? Are these fucking kids bothering you? You know? And I'm like, yeah, they are. And so like a lot of shoving ensues and like, get the fuck out of here, you little pussies, whatever. And they chased them out of the mall, like on our behalf. I was like, this is fucking great. I got to get in with this crew.
They were like your guardian angels back then, those two.
Yeah. I mean, this is before Jim Haidt fucking totally went full right wing. Like he was flirting with it. He was like on the fence at that point, but he was just like this punk rock guy that was like edgy, you know, total edgelord, 90s edgelord, right? 91.
Yeah.
1991 version of an edgelord. And which I totally loved. And Norm, who was like this fucking like biracial skinhead who did a zine and like, you know, he was getting into arguments with Mike Bullshit from Go. And I was like, these guys are like cool, they're tough, they look cool, they're shit stirrers. Like I'm told like they were heroes to me at that point, you know. Fast forward.
It's funny because you talk to Norman now. He's so soft spoken. You would never guess.
I know. That
was him back then.
Does not like if you run into him, he does not like he doesn't deny that stuff exists, but he's kind of like he's like me in that way where we're both like we were pretty stupid when we were younger. But to me he was like super cool, and Jim Haidt was like ultra cool. And then you know, years later, maybe like a year later. I was dating a girl whose best friend was dating Jim Haidt. They both lived in Stony Brook. And that's when Jim Haidt started. Like, I had a Very Small Records t-shirt that said like the California label, and it said like race mixing is cool with like some kind of picture on it. And he was like, you know, that's fucked up. You're betraying your race with that shirt. And I was like, it's getting weird. No. This is getting super weird. This is not what I signed up for. So yeah.
Well, that's another thing I've seen like in recent years, a lot of like younger people in the scene, like kind of coming out and saying, oh, these old heads, they're exaggerating the whole, there was white supremacists and Nazis at shows.
Oh no, they were like,
but that was a real thing.
Yeah, it was real. It wasn't like they would show up Sieg Heiling or whatever, or they would show up with a bunch of flags, you know. But they would slip in for a while, you know. They would slip in, get the vibe, and they would kind of mingle, and it was like, well, if they don't fuck with anyone, then, you know, who cares? Let's just, you know, keep doing our thing. And it wasn't until later, it was maybe like 90, everything I just described was like 91, 92. And it was like 94, 95 when like Neglect would play and like a contingent of Nazis would show up specifically to disrupt the show. Like they'd show up with a gun or, you know, whatever. And it would be like, all right, the Nazis are here. They're going to try to fight us. Or there would be a show in like Holbrook. And they wouldn't come to the show, but there was a 7-Eleven that all the kids would go to get drinks, and they would wait at the 7-Eleven and kind of fuck with kids there. So it became, Long Island was like infested with Nazis in the 90s, and you really never knew I I remember I got tattooed at Da Vinci Tattoo in Wantagh, and I walk out, and it's Jim Haight and this guy Mike Trace, who was like his kind of like the. You ever see that movie My Bodyguard? It was like that. It was like Lindemann. Well, you should watch that movie.
No.
He was like this giant biker Nazi that he would bring around so he could say whatever he wanted because he had Mike Trace with him, and Mike Trace had a gun. And they're just like they're just outside the tattoo parlor, and they're like it's like me and Bones from Neglect. It wasn't called Bones because he was super strong and big.
Right.
And they're just like fucking with us, and they said something about Bones being because he was mixed race, and they were like, you fucking half whatever. And there wasn't much we could do because whatever. And at one point I was like, hey, fuck you, don't say that about Bones. And then boom, I got smashed in the face, and I just fucking we couldn't do anything about it. And they were like, fuck you, and tell the rest of the Neglect guys we're coming for them too or whatever. I just drove home like fucking with a bloody mouth. I was like crying. It was super embarrassing, but that was like the reality of the time.
Yeah. Thank God it's not like that anymore.
No, everybody's cool now.
Yeah. So I guess early into you getting into the scene, you were more of like a behind the scenes guy, like putting on shows before you actually started a band.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of musical talent. But I wanted to, it was kind of that urge to like be a part of something. And I was never a part of the football team. I was never a part of the lacrosse team. The ROTC kids hated me. I didn't fit in with any of those groups. So when I found punk rock, I was like, how do I participate? And then, it started out with Mind Over Matter, because John and George were in the band, and I started making their flyers, in my own half-assed way. And I drew some of their whatever, like a sticker, and made logos for them. And then eventually it was like, oh, we're trying to play this show. We were playing at Sundance. We're playing at this non-alcoholic bar over here. And I was like, well, why don't you play at this place? Why don't you play at that place? And I would just cold call the bars or cold call the venue and be like, can this band come and play here? And eventually I just sort of figured out how that world worked in my own like primitive DIY way, and just sort of started making stuff happen that way. So the Angle was like the big one, my first club that was like, I was like, oh, can I book a show here? Mind Over Matter, and like, I forget, Silent Majority, and maybe another local band. And they're like, sure. And then packed out, tons of kids came. I don't know why, but we didn't know what we were doing promoting, but we just made flyers and put them in every record store and t-shirt place and everything. And they were like, oh, can you do this every week? And I was like, yeah. I didn't even think about the fact that I could have made money doing it. I was like, I'll do it every week, and then I'll have like all these bands come to play that I want to see. So I would like call like Bad Trip from New York or whatever, Super Touch, and all these other bands that I liked. And I was like, do you want to play this club? And the first time I got asked for a guarantee, I was like, no, what if I don't? How do I pay a guarantee? Like Black Train Jack asked me for $100. I was like, oh, fuck. And then, from there onwards until like, whatever, I think I booked my last show in like early 2000s in Brooklyn. Kind of, okay. It's just, yeah.
So the Angle was in Mineola, slightly before my time, so I never went, but I've seen pictures. And what was up with that stage?
I don't think it was meant to be a stage. Yeah.
There was like a railing in front of it, right?
Yeah. So is it like a dance club and not a proper like concert venue? And that's what the deal is?
I think so. I think it's
that's like a platform for people to dance on, let's say.
I think so. Or it was a restaurant where, you would eat up there or something, but it was unclear. Like the whole setup was very strange. And that was super weird. I don't even know how we found the place. I think we found it just because we were looking for places to meet girls. We were like, oh, there's a non-alcoholic club that we can get into. We were all 16 and 17 in Mineola, and it's so we're like, all right, let's drive to Mineola. Just like, might as well be driving to fucking Atlanta, Georgia. So we did, and then I think that was when we were like, we could do a show here, and they don't serve beer, so they'll let us do it, and they'll let all the kids in, they'll let all our friends in, and that's how it happened.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, as far as getting into playing in bands, Milhouse was not your first band. There was something else before that?
Yeah. Well, when Eddie Reyes got bounced from Mind Over Matter, he wanted to do a band, and I think I had sung along with Mind Over Matter or something, so he knew that I could yell really loud, and that was really the point. That was the only thing. That was the only qualification. So it was like him and some other kids from Amityville. Paul was one of them who went on to be in Silent Majority, and was it we call our band No Thought, which I think was like a weird way to try to diss Mind Over Matter or something. But I don't know. So I was like, all right, cool. So we wrote like 4 or 5 songs and played a couple of shows at the Angle, and that was it. And then I remember the day I quit the band was the day my dad died. I get a call from my grandmother, like, your dad's dead. It's like, oh, fuck. And I was supposed to go to band practice. And so I called Eddie and I'm like, I can't go to practice. My dad just died. And he's like, man, if you don't want to come to practice, you don't have to make up fucked up excuses. That's fucked up. And he like gave me a whole bunch of shit. I was like, okay, my dad's dead, so whatever. And then I just never called him back, and then that was it for that band. And then I think
So that was that.
Yeah, they had another singer for a while. This guy Cosmo that sang, or that was like sort of around the Vice Grip guys. He didn't sing in Vice Grip, but he was like in that contingent. So they got him to sing, and they played a bunch more, and I booked them, and it was all amicable after that. But yeah, it was like, my dad's dead, dude. Like, what the fuck do you want? And then I remember the first time I got glasses. Like Eddie, I don't know what it's with Eddie that he doesn't believe things, but I got glasses and I showed up at something and he's like, "Why are you wearing those fake glasses?" And I'm like, I can't see. Why do you think I'm always lying? So yeah, so that was that. And then Milhouse came about later when Brian and actually I think it was Andrew Orlando and I, Andrew who did the Reservoir label that put out the Silent Majority records. We and him were like, we saw Angel Hair and some other bands like that. Like, let's do a band like that. And then I'm like, oh, I want my friend Brian to be in the band from Loyal to None. And I don't even know if Brian really knew how to play guitar at that point, but he was like, yeah, okay. And that was it. And then we started that band, and that went on for a while.
Not a lot of bands doing that type of thing on Long Island at the time.
No, really.
Or really New York.
No, definitely not New York. I think the only bands that were sort of, on the same wavelength as far as like that style were probably like Scapegrace, Half Man, some of the out east bands, and they came at it from a very New York perspective. They brought that like kind of like screechy California sort of, middle of nowhere proto screamo, for lack of a better term. And then they were like straight up New York hardcore kids. And so that was just that was kind of how that was the trip we were on.
And now somewhere in this time, like 93, 94, a big part of the Lindenhurst story is the PWAC.
Yeah.
The Common Ground Collective.
94. April 94 was the first show. George Reynolds actually booked that. I didn't even book it.
But you eventually became part of that collective that was booking there. Yeah,
it started out, George found the place for whatever, I don't even know how he found it. And I was on tour at that point with, I helped drive Garden Variety on their first US tour, because out of the 3 guys in the band, only one had a driver's license. So they needed somebody else to help drive. So they were like, "Can you drive? And do you want to go on tour?" And I was like, "Yes and yes, I'll do it." And so George booked that first show while I was away, and it was like the all-star show. It was like Mind Over Matter, VOD, Silent Majority, whatever. And I heard about it, and I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And then George is like, "I don't want to book shows. Like, you be here. Here's the guy's number. Call him up and start booking stuff." So I was like, "Oh, cool." So I booked like. The first show I booked there, I think, was Chokehold and Bloodlet and like Bad Trip. I don't remember if it was Bad Trip. It might have been Neglect. I honestly don't remember, but it was Chokehold. I don't remember who else I booked with them. And then later I booked like Mouthpiece and Bad Trip, and then I just kept doing stuff. And then at one point, the PWAC staff, I was just doing shows like 2 or 3 times a month, and the PWAC guy was like, "You're generating a lot of money for us. Do you want to do this all the time? Can you do a show every week?" And I was like, "Tell you what, do you use this space for anything else?" And they were like, "No." It's like, it's just big empty auditorium. Like once in a while they would have ceremonies there.
Yeah. For those that don't know, this is the People with AIDS Coalition, which was on 109.
Oh yeah.
Next to where Optimum is right now. And it was just a big warehouse space in the back of the building, nondescript.
I'm guessing Optimum is what Cablevision became. Optimum.
Yes. Yeah.
Cable provider. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, we the purpose of the People with AIDS Coalition was to provide support services and community for people that had AIDS. At the time, having AIDS was like a scarlet letter, so you couldn't really.
Yeah.
It's hard to get a job. It was hard to get like medical care, things like that. So they had a vital. They were vital to the community of people that had AIDS, and they were always fundraising, yeah, as one does. So they were like, "Can you?" So they asked if I could do more shows and do more stuff more often, and I was like, "I got a counter offer for you. We'll rent the room from you. You can use it whenever you want. Just give us enough notice, but we'll be your tenant, and we'll do shows all the time, and we'll pay you this much money a month." And they were like, "Sold." So that's when we formed the Common Ground Collective, which was like, I turned around to all my friends and I was like, "Well, I made this deal, but what if we fucking don't make enough money and we can't pay the rent? We still got to meet the minimum." And so we were like, okay, we all agreed that we'll cover any shortfall and we'll help kind of govern the space and make sure that, like, you know, shows get booked, people get treated right. There's always staff to cover stuff, whatever. Because I'm like, I can book constant shows, but I can't be here all the time. Milhouse was like starting to tour and stuff like that. So it was like me, Tommy, Rich, and a bunch of people that sort of drifted away from the hardcore scene. Some that are sort of still involved peripherally, but like this girl Michelle, who also did shows at other venues, Michelle Lago, and I kind of forget who else. So yeah, and then Christian McKnight came in with his like quote unquote record store that he sublet from us in the back to sell his records or whatever.
Yeah.
So
and now he's the booking agent.
Yeah, which is like, good for him. He
Yeah.
he took it and ran with it, and he seems to enjoy it. I wouldn't enjoy doing what he does at that level. It would be,
It's a lot.
I'd be burned out. I wouldn't even enjoy music anymore. But like I was burnt out probably towards the end of the '90s anyway. But he was he likes doing it, and he was sort of part of the whole process too. So yeah, but he wasn't down on paper as like, I will give you money if you can't pay the rent. But
what did they charge you for the space?
I don't remember. It was something that
Okay.
by today's money would not be a lot. It would probably be the rent of an apartment in Lindenhurst, right?
Gotcha.
So, but at the time, to me, to us, it was like, got a lot of money, and we're responsible for this money.
Mhm.
I mean, you were charging no more than $10 for a show, so
Yeah, and we would
could have been.
get shit and feel guilty if we charged that much even. And that was like more like Tyler.
Yeah.
Tyler was like the only New York or Long Island promoter for like a very long time until I started doing shows, which I didn't even mention. That was kind of like all the shows I went to before I started booking shows were done by Tyler at like shithole bars or whatever. And yeah, so I kind of learned a lot from him, but he also became very competitive when we started doing our own shows too. And then we would partnered with him, and then it still got competitive. But whatever, it's all past bullshit.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So I did prepare a little bit for this episode.
Oh,
I fished out a bunch of PWAC flyers. Yeah. No, I should have done this for every musical guest, but whatever. So yeah, this is one I think you mentioned before. This is Neglect's Send Off to Europe show.
Oh,
SFA and Overcast.
was that the PWAC?
It's the PWAC, yeah. This is the first PWAC flyer I ever got, actually. I did not go to the show then.
I remember Neglect and SFA. I think that was, does it say King Size Bookings Presents on it?
No, it does not.
I don't know that I ever booked Overcast, but that would track. I remember SFA playing.
Also, this is the very last show.
Yeah.
Sick of It All, Silent Majority. Overcast is on the flyer, but they did not play.
They did not play. I think,
No.
I forget who else jumped on instead, but yeah, that was
Sons of Abraham,
maybe.
I think.
Yeah. It might have been like Sons of Abraham and Milhouse like split a couple of songs. I think maybe we played that show. I don't remember.
Oh, you might have, yeah.
Yeah, like
Yeah.
like 4 songs or something. But I might be lying. I don't remember. That show was huge, and it was a real bummer because it was because of Cablevision that we lost the space. I'm sure you've heard that story from other people, but they just didn't like kids hanging out in their parking lot once they set up shop there.
I also remember like the American Journal show that you were on when there was a rave night. They came to the PWAC or something like that.
I was going to mention that because they did you real dirty on that show.
Yeah, that wasn't the straw that broke the camel's back, but that didn't help us when things got hard to negotiate later on. But yeah, they showed up. We had booked a Warzone show, which was fine, and sort of not.
I was at that show, yes.
Oh, you were? Okay. That show went off without a hitch. And that's
Yeah.
but there was that, and there was like a week before or a week later, there was an actual rave, and we would sometimes sublet the space out to promoters that did raves, and we made way more than our rent, especially when we did raves. We would make a lot of money, and we were again dumb, didn't keep any of it, didn't say let's split it up or let's profit or whatever or put it in the bank. We like incorporated as a business, but we would just spend all the money on like, well, we need a new PA for the back room, or let's pay to build a small stage in this room that doesn't need a stage, or whatever. Let's fix this, fix that, and we never. I think at the end when everything closed down, there was like $650 or something in the fund, and I used that to rent PAs for like the next few VFW hall shows I did, and eventually it just vanished.
Yeah.
But yeah, the what was I talking about? How did I get on this?
That American Journal
Oh,
episode
American Journal. Yeah, I still
where
have
they
that.
totally took you out of context.
Yeah,
I think.
they
Yeah.
they spliced footage of the two things together, so they would
Yeah.
see an exterior of like skins and punks hanging outside the Warzone show, and then they'd go in and it would be like this crazy rave, and they had hidden cameras of people doing drugs and stuff.
Yeah.
So it was like, I had to go to Barry, the director of the PUAC, and say like, this is what happened, and he was totally got it. He understood. Um, thing about older gay guys is that they kind of they've seen it. They know when they're being fucking targeted, or when shit's not the narrative is against them. So
Of course. Yeah.
he was really cool, and he's like, and they were like, we all called them and complained and said like this is bullshit, and in the meantime we were like no more fucking raves, like cut this shit off, at the stem. And so they were like, all right, we'll come down and interview you and get your side of the story. And they come down and like we set up a table in that big room. It was just me and like maybe Tommy or maybe somebody else and Barry at a table, and the American Journal crew comes in to interview him, and they start asking him like, are you responsible for dealing drugs to these children? Did you know that underage kids are doing drugs? And they just start hitting him with like the straight up like those questions, those like fucking Fox News questions. And he was like, he's struggling to answer, and then finally he just tears off the mic and throws it down, and he's like, fuck you guys, get out of my building, like this is bullshit. He's like, you want to run your story, run it. And so the PUAC stood by us, and we kept doing shows after that, punk shows and hardcore shows, and we were doing fine. But then Cablevision was the next specter, where they were like, and I can't fully blame them, you're a property owner, and we did a dystopia show from California. I don't know if you remember that band, but
Yeah.
and of course they graffitied everywhere, and I'm like, did you?
They have a particular fan base. Yeah.
They do. And I mean, it's them, the band themselves too. They're like that dystopia logo that's on their record was on the back of the PUAC and on Cablevision's building, and I was like, just why do you have to do this shit? Like we were all DIY kids, but we were all dumb kids too. So that started the trend where then Cablevision started they would pay off-duty cops to sit in the parking lot and watch the shows. And we got to know the cops too. And we were like, let's make friends with those guys. And we'd buy them coffee and bring them Cokes and stuff. And that worked for a while. But then they were reporting back like, yeah, there was 1,000 kids in that room. They got the fire department involved. The fire department's like, the legal capacity is like 100. And we were like, we can't survive limiting 100 people to a show. We won't be able to pay the rent. And that was it. We got shut down.
Yeah.
So
I want to put a pin in the cop thing because that relates to the next venue you guys did a little bit. There's a couple of shows. There's a couple of PUAC shows I want to ask you about first. Number one is Fugazi. That was like the big. So there's a few cool people that showed up to that show too.
Yeah, that was wild. The guest list they turned in had like Joan Jett, Henry Rollins. I don't know if he turned up or not, but Joan Jett was definitely there. Kristen Pfaff from I think she was in Hole, or maybe it was the other person from Hole. It wasn't Courtney Love, but it was like a lot of people like that. It was just like all these like cool people at the time that were like of big bands at the time that were like showing up at this shitty DIY venue, and it was cool. It was really fun. It was one of the most just like thrilling shows that I ever was a part of. Because I was just like, this is like a huge band. It's a band I listened to as a kid, like, or it's at least like Ian MacKaye from Minor Threat. It was like I was like, wow, I'm gonna meet him, and and whatever. And then all these like celebrities are showing up, and it's only $5, and like I had to figure out how to sell advance tickets, which I had never done before. So I had to like find a ticket printer and bring like 100 tickets to Utopia and be like, you sell these tickets, and bring 100 tickets to Record Connection and whatever. And I think it went pretty well. Not despite the fact that we were on that bus accident, which I'm sure you heard about like a few days before.
I actually don't remember that story. So,
Oh, you don't know that story?
no, if you want to share.
Well, just to put a pin in the Fugazi thing, it was a great show. It was like, that was like what, 95? So I was
Must have been, yeah.
21. So I was like super starstruck, super earnest and eager. And like Ian McKay, the back of the PWAC was like sort of we used it as a small show space, but there's a whole section of the room that was corded off that had all belongings of people, presumably people that had no place to store their own stuff or had passed away. And it was just like there, and it had been just sitting there rotting. And so he was going through this box of books, and he found this one book called Death in the Family. And he's like, "You seem like someone who would like this book," and he gave it to me. He's like, "You got to read this. This is like really important." And I read it. I don't remember much about it now, but I'm reading it just because he told me to read it.
Yeah.
And like just like getting them pizza from Pizza Town down on fucking Straight Path. And I was like, "This is the best pizza in Lindenhurst," and which I stand by. At the time, I think that was the best pizza in Lindenhurst, even though technically that might be Amityville.
I think it's West Babylon.
That West Babylon? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I was like, this pizza in Lindenhurst, and he went on stage and he's like, "This is the best pizza. The song is out to Pizza Town, the best pizza in Long Island." And I was like, I know, it's a claim. But I was pretty flattered that he was just like super down to earth and cool about it the whole time. So I had all these cool like moments with him and the band, and just seeing them load out their own shit, and like he climbed the ladder to fix the light on top of the fucking ceiling, which is like a 50-foot high ceiling or something, and he's up there like adjusting it, making sure that it's right. And they didn't have a crew or anything like that. They were just like, it was like a punk band showing up, just a popular punk band showing up. I dealt with like bands that were like Clutch, that were like utter rock stars that didn't draw half of the people.
That was the other show I was going to ask you about, because I heard that story.
Yeah.
But,
yeah. But it was awful. But that was another like Tyler moment where I don't know, he didn't handle that right. But yeah, they were just like, their crew were dicks. The band weren't even especially obnoxious, but their crew were just pushing us around and acting like we didn't know what we were doing. And we were like, "You're in our house, man. Like, this is our place." Like, they were like just spilling drinks, leaving garbage everywhere. And like, I think somebody left a drink on the soundboard for some reason. Some kid walking by like happened to set a drink down on the soundboard instead of just being like throwing in the garbage. The guy ran over and like smacked it, and it spilled all over the place and spilled all over people. And like my girlfriend at the time got called like a bitch by someone in the crew. And so we went on the thing to complain on the bus that came in a tour bus. Fugazi shows up in a fucking van and a trailer. This band shows up in a fucking tour bus. And they're just like, well, fuck you. What are you going to do about it? I'm like, "I'm trying to work through this with you." And they're like, "All right, we'll be cool from now on," or whatever. And, we'll talk to the crew. And I was like, "All right." And at the end of something else happened. And that might be mixing. Tommy might remember this more succinctly than I do, or he might remember different parts of it and be able to fill in the gaps. But at some point, we decided, fuck these guys, we're not paying them. And we gave all the money to Rich, and Rich always had a shotgun on him. So when he worked the door, so he just sat there. We're like, "We're not paying you guys." And we went back and forth and back and forth. And Tyler finally like begged me, like, "Please just pay them. Let's just put it into this. Let's all go home. We'll go to the diner. Let's just forget about it. Let's just give them their money, and you never have to book them again." And I was like, "All right, fine." And because Tyler begged me, we just like paid them. Said, "Okay, fuck you guys, whatever." And I thought that was the end of it. And then as they're leaving, they empty the bus is pulling out of the parking lot, and they empty the contents of their bathroom all over the parking lot. It reeked. It was awful.
They Dave Matthews you.
Yeah, they did that totally on purpose, and they probably thought it was hysterical. And we chased them in our cars, trying to we're like throwing things at the bus. And eventually they got on the highway, and we're like, "What are we gonna do? Let's just forget about it."
Did they even draw well that night?
No, nobody gave a shit about Clutch. No.
Yeah.
This is before they were Southern Rock, whatever the fuck they are now. When I see them on bills, I get like it just brings it all to the stars. I was so angry.
You get triggered a little.
Yeah, bro, like you fucking picked on kids, basically. You just picked on a bunch of kids. You could have worked with us and made it an awesome show for you guys and for us and for the audience. And instead, you just decided to be total rock star dicks. And you're a band that nobody gives a shit about on Long Island, or at that time they didn't.
Yeah.
So yeah, and then like Cannibal Corpse shows up and plays, and it's like Fugazi. They're just like, "Hey, what's up, dudes?" And fucking
Flyer right here.
yeah, like they were like
There you
one of
go.
the coolest. We were like, "Oh, here we go again, more rock stars, more metal rock stars, whatever." And they're just like, "You guys fucking rule. This place is awesome." We were like, "Fuck," but
These guys get it. Yeah.
yeah, they get it. So it's funny, the bands you least expect to be cool, or the bands that deserve to kind of be a little more aloof, are tend to be the more down to earth, and the ones you never expect are just like total rock star douchebags.
Yeah, it's interesting how that works, right?
Yeah, it's
But
depressing.
yeah, we kind of glanced over your bus accident story, so I am curious about what
Oh,
happened.
taking DIY to a moronic level. Um, we we thought, okay, well, one thing Fugazi was clear on is that they don't want anybody stage diving, and we were like, okay, totally get it. Um, So they wanted to have barricades in front of the stage. So we are like, great, barricades. Do we try to find a company that rents barricades? No. We're gonna go steal those sawhorses from construction sites, these sawhorses and stuff. We're gonna drive Tommy's van around and throw them all in the back of the van and bring them to the PWAC. We'll just get as many as we can. This was a genius idea. So I remember the night we went to the movies and we saw The Prophecy 2, which I don't remember a thing about the movie. So we saw that and they were like, all right, let's go get those barricades now. So we're driving around at like midnight, 1 a.m, Tommy's van, just like looking for barricades. At some point, Tommy's making a left turn, but you get to that point where you're like, should I stay or should I go? Should I drive or should I stop? There's a bus coming and he's getting closer and he kind of freezes up and he's like, he didn't know if he should keep going or if he should back up or what. And then we were like, Tommy, go, 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 go. And before you know it, the fucking bus smashed right into us because the driver wasn't looking. We found out later. The
Oh
driver was
no.
like figuring out her route sheet or something, as she was driving. She never hit the brakes. There were no like brake marks in the road. So she just plowed right through us. And it was me, the genius crew doing this, no voice of reason, was me, Tommy, um, Eddie Reyes, Bobby Eckstein from the Warped Weeble Wobbles, Mike Kennedy from VOD, Franco, who was just like, for everybody loved Franco. He was like just sort of a Merrick kid. And I can't remember if there was one other person in there, but it was definitely us six. And we just got fucking demolished. I remember I don't remember the moment of impact or anything like that, but I remember like it was right outside that 7-Eleven on Hempstead Turnpike. Sort of if you're driving west of Utopia, I don't know if it's even there anymore. I'm acting this like every fucking 7-Eleven in Long Island, but it was outside of 7-Eleven that it happened, and I ran into the 7-Eleven. Like I could feel blood all over my face, and I couldn't open an eye, and I was like,
Oh no.
there's people that watched the whole accident. There were just like people out, late night getting snacks and whatever, and they were like, and I ran up to like somebody outside the 7-Eleven, and I was like, do I still have an eye? And the girl was like just nodded, like, yes, you're just bleeding from your head. I was like, okay, cool. And then somebody was like, sit down, like you're in shock. and Mike Kennedy was in shock. And then Eddie Reyes and Franco had to be taken away in an ambulance because they were like super fucked up. They ended up Bobby had to get staples in his head. I don't remember what happened to Eddie specifically, but he was like, like he spent the night, maybe 2 nights in the hospital. Franco too. Tommy, fine. Totally fine. It hit the passenger side as he was turning, so he was fine. And I think in the passenger seat was Mike Kennedy. So I think he got hit the heart. I could be wrong on that though, or maybe no. The passenger seat was Eddie. So that's why he got hit so hard. And we were all in the back, and we just go flying around, and we just fucking, that's it. We ended up having to, file a claim, and we were like, we're gonna sue the bus company. And then our lawyer was like, Tommy, you should get a different lawyer. Because we had to sue his insurance company too. So it was like, tricky. So we let the lawyers handle it all. And, you know, we weren't suing Tommy. We weren't trying to drive him out of his house and home, but the lawyer was like, his insurance company should pay because he was the driver, so he's liable. So we all got like settlements from that, and I blew it on who knows records and comics at the time probably. So yeah, so that was the bus accident story. We always joked about it after that. It was almost the La Bamba equivalent of Long Island hardcore because it would have taken out like 4 bands.
Right. Yeah.
So you know, yeah. So that was that story. It was kind of funny. We lived to tell the tale, so it's funny.
Yeah. So yeah, the next venue, a short-lived venue in Bayshore called 45 Park Avenue, and
Yeah.
this relates. Like, I heard something about like you did shows in that space because it was also super illegal, but you kind of did it under the guise of it being a benefit for police every time.
I don't remember
Is that
anything like that.
okay?
I heard somebody else talk about that on one of the podcasts, and I was like, I don't know if that's
Yeah.
accurate. I mean, maybe that was a story somebody told to a cop or something, but at the time we were like, or maybe it was an idea we had that we were like, maybe we'll get the cops on our side by doing a cop benefit. But we only got to do like 4 shows there, maybe 3, before we got shut down. The
I have the
real
listing right here.
Oh, is that all the shows? Like
Yeah, it looks like it.
including a bunch that
There was,
happened, probably?
of course, the Life of a Spectator record release.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah. And then the last show, which I was also at, was the one H2O was supposed to play, but got shut down.
Right, that I remember. There was a VSS show, I think, that was memorable.
VSS Pacifier. Yeah.
Yeah, VSS played so loud. Unlike any band that had played there, the windows outside were vibrating and shaking, and we were like, we weren't that far from residential areas, so we were like, is this going to get us shut down? Is this fucking San Diego band going to get us shut down? But it wasn't. I mean, that might have been people. The cops might have been hip to us at that point, where they were like, something's up at this place, and that's why they showed up at that other show. But yeah, we only got to do a couple of shows there. The realtor that we dealt with, because we had all this money left over at the time from the PWAC, and we were like, we'll just put a deposit on another place. And we knew the guy knew what we were going to do, but he was like, yeah, you should be fine. Like he could have been the adult in the room and been like, you're gonna get shut down. This is highly illegal. But he was like, yeah, all right, fine. And he took, our down payment and all that stuff. And it was like, we like some of the money we gave him was like in change, like, so he knew what the fuck he was doing. Like rolled up quarters, and so like $10 in quarters, $10 in quarter. So yeah, so then that happened, and then when we got shut down, that was when I had like $600 left and just used that for like a handful of Lindy VFW shows, Lindy Civic Center, those shows. And then I moved to Brooklyn.
Gotcha.
Do Long Island shows anymore.
I do have, right here. I have a Lindenhurst VFW show. Milhouse at the top here, and it says with cool ass RT. I don't know who made this flyer.
I definitely didn't, despite the fact that it's got clearly 9 different fonts.
Lots of fonts.
That used to be my specialty.
As was the convention, yeah.
Yeah, no, but I would have put some kind of horrifying graphic picture on it, or at least a comic book panel or something. You need a visual element as well as 9 fonts.
Sure, of course, yeah. But yeah, so we're kind of bouncing subjects a bit, but like Milhouse is going throughout this entire time.
Yeah.
So you guys are putting out records on Rec Age and touring.
Yeah. We put out the EP and then the album on Rec Age, and which was kind of cool because Rec Age at the time was and we were kind of myopic in our view of music and everything in a weirdly because I was very open to all sorts of stuff, but we didn't really have the worldly perspective of like all this stuff kind of connects. I'm riffing, but the Rec Age idea was to kind of be like Alternative Tentacles and have like this sort of all very post modern punk kind of like all different styles coming together, not necessarily a hardcore label or New York hardcore label. They wanted to kind of be this weird, cool, artsy, progressive music label, and that's where Milhouse fit in, and like whatever. And then Exit was sort of the spin-off of that, which was like, all right, well, people still think of us as a hardcore label or a hardcore New York hardcore label, so we'll do this imprint and call it Exit, and that's where all the straight up hardcore will live, like Trip Face and Silent Majority and so on.
So Exit was owned by a German couple.
No, uh, they met in Germany and they spoke German often together when we would be there with them. But uh,
They weren't from there.
no,
Okay.
the husband was Pavlos was Greek and Amber was from the Pacific Northwest. They met together in Greece at school and bonded over punk rock and stuff, and that was kind of their. And then they were like, "We'll start a label," and they were very very cool. They were like, in a weird way, they were like the surrogate mom and dad for a bunch of us. At least we were like, oh, this older couple that's also cool, but they're also like they have kids and they have an apartment and they know about art and they it was just kind of like I should have been even more in awe of them than I already was because they were like they
Real adults.
yeah, they were real adults, but they were like setting a template for DIY stuff that we would follow. So yeah,
Yeah.
so Milhouse sort of fit in there, and we might have sounded like a lot of other bands at that time, but not a lot of other bands in New York. So that's why I think we stood
Yeah.
out. So so yeah, and then Milhouse toured the US a couple times and then Europe. And then I just sort of fell in with the Indecision guys, and then they were having their problems with Tom. And that's when I took over that spot for about, like, I don't know if it was like a little over 2 years, I guess. It seemed a lot longer, but
Which was a surprising choice for a lot of people at the time. Like we did not expect
yeah,
you to be
yeah,
singing for Indecision. But then I heard it and I was like, oh, this is Unbroken with a good drummer. So
yeah.
I'm
And
into
I
it.
think that was kind of, they were going for that. They were, Justin was always like Unbroken, Resurrection,
Yeah.
Work, all those bands were kind of where he was coming from anyway. So the fact that they were like this Brooklyn band and all the accoutrements that come with that, he still had this vision of being more like kind of grittier and grimier. And that's where I came in. And I had worked for the label, plus I had toured with them, plus I had like, we covered each other's songs. Milhouse and Indecision would cover each other's songs. So
Yeah.
it was like, yeah, all right, fuck it. They already knew how I sounded when I would sing. So, but yeah, it threw a lot of people off. It threw a lot of the sort of, I like things the way they are type of people. But when we would tour and we'd play Denver or fucking North Carolina or whatever, it was like it was great, you know.
Mm.
So, but eventually, my personality was too volatile. I was too much of I was a jerk all the time, and it became too much to deal with. And we were all like living together in the van, and we were all in our 20s and fucking hormonal and crazy. And so uh, that had to reach its end. So when that happened, then I just bailed from Brooklyn entirely shortly after that and moved to Baltimore. Baltimore for a couple years.
Okay. And also, this is probably your band I know the least about, but the Shemps.
Oh yeah,
When did that exist, and what was that
I
like?
moved back from Baltimore in 2003, early 2003. And as I was moving back, Bill Florio, who I'd known since those days that I mentioned with Jim Haight and Norm and stuff, I had also met Bill Florio around that time. And the way I met him,
That was Bug Out Society.
yeah, he was the bass player in Bug Out Society, and he was a fixture at every show. Not only did he go to every show at that point, but he was always outside of the show hawking Bug Out Society CDs. And at the time, this is how old I am. Having a CD was like, whoa, this band has a CD. And he was selling it for $5. $5 for a CD? And he would sell them hand over fist at like, you'd go see Fear or fucking Typo Negative or whatever the fuck in New York, and he'd be there hawking the CDs. So I knew him through that. And then Bug Out Society played Carol's Place in Oceanside, and I had just learned to drive. Has somebody told you the story already?
I don't think so. No.
Might be the thing I'm the most famous for of anything I've done in my life.
Okay.
I'm just joking. I'm not famous for anything. The I had just learned to drive, and the car that I had was my mom's old car. She gave me her old '76 Buick Regal, and it was like it had been stolen, and it was originally red, and the people who stole it painted it blue. And so when she ended up getting a new car, she gave this car to me, and it had like a rotted hole in the passenger side floor that we kept like a stop sign over or something, or some sort of street sign so you didn't stick your leg through the hole as you were driving. But this was my car. I was one of the only kids in our crew that had a car. So it was like me and George Reynolds, I think. So I was always driving Neglect around and driving Mind Over Matter around, and then this half blue, half red car, because the paint that whoever stole it, painted it with like some kind of paint that came off in the rain. So it looked ridiculous. At one point outside Rich's house, we were all fucking around with spray paint, and I spray painted "Kill Yourself" on the side of the car. And we put like stickers all over it and shit. And I would drive around with a car that just said "Kill Yourself" on the side, the entire length of the car. Which I don't know. I hope my kids don't do any of this stupid shit. So this was the car I was driving, and I went to this Bug Out Society show, and it was with the Expendables, which was Jim Hate's later punk band. So it's kind of funny. This is when he was right on the verge of going full white power. So it was like Wasi Pungo, Bug Out Society, the Expendables, and some other band. And we all left the show. It was like me, maybe Tommy, maybe Derek. I don't remember who was in the car. Derek was definitely in the car. And I pull out of the parking spot, and I just drive super fast in reverse, not like without looking or anything, and crash through the wall of the bar. We literally knocked down the wall. The car is inside the bar. And everybody kind of freezes, and you have that moment. And I'm like, and I just took the fuck off. Drove away. I didn't stay there to answer for it. I was like, I hope they didn't see my license plate. I just took off, and I took off down the road Carol's place was on, and it's a dead end. And I'm like, no. And Derek's like, fuck, buddy, what are we gonna do? So spin around and drive past the club. And as I'm driving past, everybody's looking at the hole, and they're pointing at my car driving by, and I'm like terrified. I spent the next like 48 hours in mortal terror that somebody got my license or whatever. Somebody told the club who I was. But in true punk rock solidarity, nobody was like, oh yeah, that's Artie, and here's his address, and he lives in London. Nobody said anything like that.
Didn't snitch, yeah.
Nobody snitched. And then Bill, I wrote to Bug Out Society, like ordered a shirt. I was like, I didn't get a chance to buy a shirt because I'm the guy that crashed into the club. Haha. Here's $5 for a shirt. And it was really, so I ended up, next time I saw Bill, he's like, you're that fucking guy. So Bill and I became really good friends. And we also did, this is another funny story. I'm sorry. Do you have like a fixed time? Because I'm just going to go on and on.
Not at all.
No. Okay. I assume you edit this for boring content. Bill and I went to see
mostly for me stuttering and stumbling. That's about it.
I'm taking over most of that for you. Bill and I would drive to shows a lot, and he wanted to go see Earth Crisis and Strife and Snapcase on that winter, whatever the fuck it was called, tour.
The Victory Tour or whatever.
Victory Tour, yeah. So this had to be like 1994, I guess, maybe 95. And he was like, you want to go? And I was like, yes. And I went to shows with him where he would do ridiculous shit. He was just like, he's just a natural prankster. And I love this about him because, like I said, I like people that just rub people the wrong way sometimes. I'm like really drawn to those people. And Bill, like we went to see Bikini Kill in Connecticut, and Bill was just like heckling them with a megaphone. He brought a megaphone to the show to heckle them, not with anything like sexist or weird, just like, I like you guys better live or something like don't quit your day job. Just stupid joke than a megaphone. And there's nothing you can really do. It's because everybody's laughing. So he's like, do you want to go see Earth Crisis? And I knew automatically what was going to be involved. And I'm like, but I also like Earth Crisis. So this is like two things that I like. So yes. So we drove to the show in New Bedford, Massachusetts at this VFW hall type thing or YMCA type thing. And there was the stage, and it's like basically a gym, giant gym. And above the stage and around the gym is like this balcony area, which might have been like a track you could run around or something like that. But it was like overlooking the stage. And Bill brought all these. His day job used to be like filming. He was a professional videographer for like bar mitzvahs and weddings and kids' birthdays and things like that. So he had all these inflatable guitars as props. They were like pink and green and orange. Yeah. And he had like a box of them. And so we went up in the balcony and we blow up all these guitars. And just put a big pile of them. Nobody knows what the fuck we're doing. Nobody can see us up there. Nobody's even looking. So everybody's like moshing to whatever the fuck. I think Overcast played that show too. That might have been where I met them. But anyway, so then Earth Crisis goes on, and I run down and I'm like moshing and stuff like that. And the guy, Carl, is like, so does everything sound okay? It was like one song in, and he's like, does everything sound okay out there? Can you guys hear everything okay? And I was like, more guitars. And all the kids start yelling, more guitars, whatever. And he's like, oh, it sounds like we need more guitars. Can we get more guitars? And they start the next song. And at this point, I'm running into the balcony, and Bill and I just grab all the guitars and just start dumping them on Earth Crisis. And they're getting showered with these inflatable guitars. And in Bill's mind, this is like we're doing this and we're risking getting our asses kicked. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be fucked up. Like somebody's going to try to start a fight. And they loved it. Everybody loved it. Everybody's like, this is fucking great. Kids are like windmilling with the guitars and hitting each other with the guitars. It ended up being like one of the most fun things we did.
At least it's not yogurt, right?
Yeah, you've heard that story.
Oh, yeah.
So that wasn't even him. He got blamed for that, but he didn't actually do that. That was some kid from Philadelphia that did that. But it gets attributed to Bill, which is not hard to believe. You know, if I didn't know Bill, I'd be like, I was totally Bill that did that.
That was the Ink and Dagger guys, I believe.
It was one of them or one of that.
One of them, yeah.
Yeah. So
anyway, okay. So I thought the Shemps was a little bit earlier. I didn't want to glance over the Baltimore part.
Let's
talk about Baltimore first, then we'll get back into the Shemps, I guess. What brought you to Baltimore?
Baltimore, I was also in that mode when I quit Indecision. I was like, I can move anywhere. I should just move somewhere where I don't really know a lot of people and whatever. And I was thinking about moving to Atlanta because I knew all these hardcore kids in Atlanta, and they were kind of like sketchy, off the grid kids. And I was like, that'll be cool. I'll live with them and whatever. And then I ended up sort of getting into a relationship with a girl from Long Island, from Merrick, who lived in Baltimore, who moved to Baltimore. And I was like, I'll come down and visit. And then turned into like, I'll just move here. And then, we stayed together for like 10 years until I moved to Chicago. But yeah, so I was like, Baltimore's as good a place as any. And I sort of knew of the Reptilian Records label, and that was really the extent of my knowledge of Baltimore. And ended up working at Reptilian, just like showing up and like they were like, oh, you want a job? You seem like you have all your limbs, and that worked out. Baltimore is a cool ass city. To this day, it's a cool city. It's just got it's a really small city. It's like a big city, small town, is what I'm trying to say. So it's like I lived there for like a month, and I knew everybody, in the scene. It was like, oh, okay, I would go to like a cafe, and the punk rock kid would be like, oh, you're friends with so-and-so, you free coffee. Or I'd go to the, fucking restaurant, the waitress would be like another punk rock. And so it was like easy to network, and you felt very at home. And it's also like just it's got a great music scene and a great music history. But also very, there's a lot of tragedy in the city. It was like I had just moved out of Baltimore when The Wire came on TV, and I was like, oh, somebody else knows.
It's pretty rough. Yeah.
Yeah.
I stayed down there for a while recording a record, and you wake up to gunshots.
Yeah.
Every morning.
Yeah. It's very sad because it's just like the city's got so much heart. I really feel like, and I would say that about a lot of places. I'm not like I don't know. But yeah, I think it's a great place. It just, I wish it didn't have to struggle so much. And, I feel a lot like that about a lot of parts of Chicago too. A lot of parts of Chicago resemble Baltimore in terms of just inequality and poverty. And it's like, it doesn't have to be this way, but it's turning the battleship around to kind of fix things seems to be more than the political bandwidth can manage.
Yeah.
So, but that's
that's a whole nother podcast for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so you end up coming back to New York, and that's when the Shemps start.
Yeah, Bill. They were looking for a singer. They kicked out their other singer, so I was a replacement singer in two bands. And they were like, and it was like, oh, but we're like a garage rock band, and we don't, it's not like a hardcore thing. And I was like, cool. Like, my time in Baltimore was spent kind of. I had always listened to other stuff besides hardcore, but in Baltimore, I really got exposed to like a lot of that sort of post noise rock stuff. I got really into Swans. I got really into Unsane. All the stuff Reptilian was putting out. It kind of broadened my horizon. So, and at the time, garage rock was like kind of like a scene that was bubbling up, and so the Candy Snatchers and the New Bomb Turks were really my only reference points for joining the Shemps. Those two bands, but I was like, fuck, I could do that. Like, it's just like screaming, but like every now and then I go, yeah, and I have like a little melody and
a little sass in it.
Yeah. But it was also like, it seemed fine to just be as big of a dick as I wanted to be. Like, unlike in Milhouse, where it was like, I could be a dick, but there was an underlying theme or an earnestness to it, or just like we're trying to argue about this to get to a better place. And the Shemps, it was like no, it was just like anger everyone, um, hit on as many girls as you can, and if you hit on 10 girls in one night, at least one is going to be down, and get as drunk as fucking possible, and drugs and et cetera. And it was like okay. And then I was doing that. I joined the Shemps, and the first show was like, almost got in a fight with the old singer, got thrown out of the bar, and then that just continued. And the Shemps was fun. It was one of the most fun bands I've been in. There are aspects of it and elements of it that today I feel would probably get me in a lot of trouble if I were to amplify them. But it was at the time it was just like to be a dick for the sake of being a dick, but also like the band was fun and good, and we played well, and we toured a bunch too. We toured a lot, and we never really won many people over in New York, but we would go to like the West Coast and do great, or like fucking down south or Midwest, and we would have a lot of fun. And people that were in the Shemps went on to be in like Sue went on to be in War on Women, and other bands like that. So it's like we were all like we knew what the fuck we were doing. But anyway, that was fun. And while I was doing that, my job was like selling merch for bands and being like the merch guy at like Hammerstein Ballroom or Roseland or whatever. So that was and that was when Christian was up and coming with being a talent buyer at Live Nation. So occasionally I'd run into him when I had to drop off their fucking mafia money.
Right.
So yeah. So that's the Shemps.
Okay. And so there was the Shemps, and then Celebrity Murders comes after that.
Celebrity Murders sort of overlapped a little bit
Okay.
because Mike wanted to do a band that sounded like this or that, and I was like, whatever, I'll be in two bands. And it was like two very distinct bands, so there was not any overlap between venues or crowds or anything like that. It was like, okay, I can do this in Celebrity Murders and do this in the Shemps. Eventually, the Shemps petered out because we were just like playing this to the same 20 people at Trash Bar, we got bored of it, and they formed a new band with another guy. But the Celebrity Murders continued for a good while, and that record to this day is one of I feel like my best lyrics that I've ever written. And I don't consider myself like a great writer by any means, but in terms of like things that I did that I can look back on and be proud of, those lyrics are like wow, I really had intent, and the result was achieved. And you don't feel like that about a lot of things in life where like I nailed it. I fucking nailed it. When it comes to art or music anyway, you don't feel like absolutely nailed it. And that's like the one thing I can point to, or like, yeah, I think that was like when I was at in the zone. But that was like a good violent band. We were confrontational too, but not always, not just for the sake of being confrontational, but we would get into it with other bands over like, can we borrow your equipment? Can you guys go on last, and that kind of thing. And we wouldn't be like, oh no, sorry. We'd be like, no, fuck you, and maybe we'll fight you. And it like would escalate probably for no reason, but it was like that was a lot of that was driven by Mike. Mike's kind of a hothead, but we were like ready to like back him up. Like, yeah, okay, sure, you want to fight? So that was Celebrity Murders. That was fun, and that kind of, when Mike quit, we continued with Eddie Ortiz for a while, who played guitar in Cattle Press and Dying Light and some other bands, and that was fun. But eventually it just trickled out because I was at that point I had a legit job, which I still have, my career job, and I just was sort of shifting. I was like, I don't want to be in a band anymore. I don't think I can do this because I have to be a real person now. I have to be an adult. I have to whatever, worry about my retirement and all that stuff. So
okay, what is your career right now? What are you doing for a living?
Oh, and I didn't even talk about Concrete Cross. I don't know how that came up. The fucking I'm in marketing. I work for a marketing company that sells advertising space inside of gyms. So if you work out in an LA Fitness or a Planet Fitness, and there's an advertisement on the screen or a billboard in the bathroom or locker room, it's probably my company that put it there. So
Gotcha.
Or it's definitely my company because there's no one else allowed in there. So I've been doing that since 2005-ish. Yeah, 2005. So yeah, and right around the time I started that was when Concrete Cross sort of like some friends of mine. Maybe that was like 2006, 2000. No, that was later. It was like 2008, 7 or 8. And I was like, all right, I'm done being in bands. And then my friend was like, you want to sing for our band? And I was like, yes. So I wasn't done. And he recorded.
It was basically Dis Nile with you singing.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
That's how it started out.
Uh-huh.
And then so that was fun. That was a lot of fun. We were like, I was a little bit older at that point than a lot of the other kids that were going to shows, and definitely than the kids than Tom and Tone and Ryan when they started it. So I was a little bit like, oh, I'm the old guy, I don't, what are all these young kids doing? But it was fun because it felt like that kind of, there's a tendency in people in my age bracket, and probably every age bracket, who look at the next step down in terms of age kids and say like, oh, that's not as cool as when I did it, or all of your stuff sounds the same, or I like that song better when blah 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 did it, or whatever. And but being in Concrete Cross, one of the things I gained from it was like, oh, this is like just as vital and just as interesting and just as cool, even if it's not always the most original. It's always coming from that same place that we came from, 10 years before, and it kind of refreshed and renewed my optimism when it comes to punk and just transgressive music in general. I was like, there's always going to be kids. There's always going to be kids figuring out how to make music and how to make art, and there's always going to be the kids that hate the kids that come after them. And I don't want to be that dick.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we always touch on in this podcast is like, everyone says, oh, we just missed the cool stuff. It just happened before our generation. But I think if you're young now and you're doing it, that's the cool stuff.
Right.
Your time.
And that's, one of the best things about Silent Majority is I felt like that was always embedded in their music, was that kind of like, our time is now kind of vibe that is timeless. So, but yeah, that was just kind of like, and it's not like I wouldn't have arrived at that conclusion on my own, but being in Concrete Cross and playing with the bands of that era, of like the mid 2000s, all the hardcore and crusty bands of that era, I was like, this is cool. I'm a little humbled, and I don't have to kind of talk about my pedigree because what's relevant is what's happening right now.
So I guess that kind of overlaps with your move to Chicago as well. You were still coming back and forth playing with them.
Yeah, like right after the record was recorded, I was like, I got to get out of New York, because if you read the lyrics to the whole Celebrity Murders record, you'll understand that I was not quite happy with myself and my ability to exist in that city. What is going on? My cats are fucking freaking out. So do you hear this? Can you hear this?
I hear something. Yeah,
they're like,
it's there
chasing shit around.
It's the witching hour for the animals.
It is. It really is. What was I talking about? I'm sorry. Not cats.
Concrete Cross.
Moving to Chicago.
Moving out of New York.
Moving to Chicago. Yeah.
So I was like, I just gotta. So my job was like, I was in that mode where I'm like, I'll go anywhere. I'll move anywhere. Which is the 3 times I've moved out of New York, the 3 times that I've moved in a major way. I was like, I could live anywhere. But Chicago was like, somebody was retiring at my company, and they were like, we need somebody to run the Chicago office. And I was like, okay. And I did that. And I realized that it's so much easier, and the standard of living is so much higher here. And I lived in like the rent I paid. I think I paid like $500 a month for the apartment that I moved into in 2010, which is still great. And that was and it was a nice apartment. It was like a 2-bedroom apartment, duplex, and I lived on the top floor. So from then on, I was like sold. I was like, the city rules. And I spent 2 years just like all the money I was making in New York, and I got a big raise to move to Chicago. And suddenly I realized the money that you make in New York doesn't go very far. But in Chicago, plus a raise, I was like, I'm buying records, I'm buying comic books, I'm buying fucking stupid memorabilia, I'm going to every possible show, I'm like buying dinner for different girls, whatever. And then I ended up meeting my wife, and then whatever. That's from 2000. Met her in 2012, and here we are.
How'd you guys meet?
Met online, the way people do, the way modern people do. but yeah, I had actually tried to meet people online when I moved here because I didn't know anyone. I knew the people I knew. I moved here thinking like I'm gonna party with this guy and this girl and this, and they were all like, oh, I don't know, it's a Tuesday, we got work in the morning. I was like, oh my God, everybody's old. Um, so yeah, so I just tried meeting people online, but that was kind of a bust. And my friend Rachel, who sang, she moved here too. We met here randomly. Like, why you live here now? You live here now? She used to sing for a Long Island band called oh my God, what were they called? Not Insomnia, not Isolation, something, some kind of Sabotage, some kind of one word name. But they were like basically a grindcore band with two girl singers, which was pretty wild for 90s Long Island. But I
I know
met
who
her.
you're talking about, and now it's going to bug me.
It's killing me. The name's killing me. I could
I'm going
text
to have to
her.
look through the flyers.
Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
I want to say it's not Insomnia, but I feel like but anyway,
Yeah.
she was like, so we met and we became friends here, and she's like, I'll find you a girl. So she found she wrote to Kim on OkCupid at the time and was like, you got to talk to this guy. She like sent her my profile, and my wife, like, or Kim wrote to me. I keep calling her my wife. She wasn't my wife at the time. She wrote to me like, hey, you seem okay, like, let's meet. And her profile was like, basically just like fuck everything, and I was like, wait a minute, how did I find this girl? And so we met up and started dating and hit it off, and that was it. And we got married in 2014 and had our first kid in 2015. And then I thought I was an adult before, but now I'm like, now I'm seriously an adult.
Yeah. I guess all's well that ends well.
Yeah. I mean,
considering your background and what could have been, you've
yeah,
you made it out the right way.
I spent a lot of time talking about my life outside of Lindenhurst, not necessarily in Lindenhurst, but like the stuff that happened in Lindenhurst it's awful, man. Like it's terrible. Like I watched it's just, okay, so the backdrop is like drug abuse, um, extreme drug abuse. My mom like sort of coming out, realizing that she was gay at the time. So that and then like, like custody stuff. So going back and forth. I remember at one point being in a courtroom where the judge was deciding custody, and took me into his chambers and said that, and I must have been 10 at this time, 11. And he took me into his chambers and he was like, so, which parent do you want to live with? And I was like, I don't want to live with either of them. Like, can I live with my grandmother? He was like, it's not an option. And eventually he let me live with my dad, even though my dad had already been arrested in and out of jail several times and had an active drug problem and was on a methadone treatment program. My mom was gay. So that trumped, it was like, yeah,
wow,
you're better off with the drug addict. So, people take for granted, a lot of this stuff today, like LGBTQ initiatives and just like the sort of the corporate feeling of like everybody matters and whatever. And they think that homophobia is just something that happens in like these backwater places. But this was like mainstream, not long ago. So
yeah, I know a guy who actually in Chicago was arrested for dancing with a man. And this was in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's recent history,
We've come a long way, but we haven't not all the way across the threshold. That stuff, there's like a lot of dark stories in that period where if you really want to horrify your listeners, I'll go on and on about. But yeah.
Yeah, but it is important because
memories.
There is that side of Lindenhurst. It's not like this idyllic thing for everyone,
No.
And it needs to, needs to be understood that that's there.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's still
100%,
there.
100%. And everybody had their dark, a lot of my friends, even the friends from quote unquote ostensibly normal families, had dark secrets going on behind closed doors that you only get to see because you're doing a sleepover or whatever, and you get to see like, the reality of it. So it was like this idyllic small town. I listened to Vinny Corrigan's episode, and he has all these amazing memories, and it sounds like this like sort of like Wonder Years type life that like I wish I could have led. And I was like listening to him, and I'm like, my story is like the dark underbelly of this. Like everything good, every good moment he has that he crystallized in that episode, I'm like, I could undercut that with like a fucking story of my dad chasing his girlfriend naked out into the backyard, and then the kid who lived adjacent kitty corner to our house watching this, and then telling all the kids at school about it the next day that like my dad chased my mom out into the stark naked with a kitchen knife, and like that's my Lindenhurst. That's all the memories I have from that place up until the point where I got into the punk rock world, and I was able to kind of say, and then in a weird way, I'm defining my own world now. Like this is like I'm establishing my own family, my own framework. Like none of this other shit that happened is
like a chosen family.
Yeah, which is that's my story is not unusual in that respect. From
not at all.
Rock,
Yeah.
But
the island of misfit toys.
It really is. That's funny that you said that. When I was 18 or 19, I tried to do a 7-inch comp. I was going to start my own label, and I was going to call it the Island of the Misfit Toys. And I thought it was kind of clever, but nobody else. They were like, "What, like the Christmas thing?" But I never ended up doing it. I collected DATs from a bunch of bands, and then they're probably in a shoebox somewhere. I was like, "This awesome Long Island comp with all the Neglect and Berserkers and whatever." Big tensions.
I recall Rich Parkavina telling me a story about you at Arby's.
Oh yeah, I mean that Arby's is a parking lot now, so and I think there's a statute of limitations. But I worked a lot of different. My first job was probably I was a stock boy / porter at Ziegler's Deli, which became Sporty's Deli, which became, I think it's a gym now. It's on Wellwood Avenue, sort of like across from where the bench used to be.
It's like a catering hall now.
It's like a catering hall now, but yeah.
Okay, yeah. So it was a deli, and I just walked around. At one point, I must have been like 12, and my mom was like, "Oh, well, my mom had a cleaning business. She started her own office cleaning business, and I would help her. And then she's like, you can get your own fucking job if you want." I was like, all right. So I just walked around to delis and stores saying like, "Do you need any help? Do you need any help?" And they were like, "Yeah." So I did that job for a while, and then I ended up delivering papers. I delivered Newsday, I delivered Daily News, I delivered Penny Saver. I had every paper out. And then I ended up working at the Little Flower Shop on Wellwood. Worked there for a while. That was kind of my the job that I had when I was in my formative punk rock phase. So I showed up normal, and then a couple weeks later I showed up with like a dyed black mohawk, and they were like, "Whatever, this kid works in the garage. Let him look however he wants." And the blonde grew in, and then they started calling me Skunk because I had a stripe down my head, so I earned the nickname Skunk, which luckily didn't stick. So the Little Flower Shop, and I lived right next door to the Little Flower Shop. There's just, if you're facing the flower shop on the right, that house is where I used to live in. And that's the second to last house I lived in with my mom when she was at that point out and gay. And so I lived with like her girlfriend and her kids. And that was like, sounds nice. It was pretty hellish because that family was totally shattered, and our family was shattered. And it was just like a bunch of gay drug addicts, living out there in this house. I sat in my room and listened to Butthole Surfers.
The worst kind of Brady Bunch.
Yeah, like the absolute worst. Then we moved to Shore Road, and that's where I spent like my senior year in high school was when we were living on Shore Road, and that's when my mom moved away, and I was just in this house by myself. So those are my jobs, and then after the Little Flower Shop, what was it? Oh, and then I just delivered papers. I feel like I had another job. Oh, yeah.
George Reynolds mentioned you worked at Avanti Pizza.
Right. Avanti. Is that Avanti still there?
It is not. It's another pizza place, but it's been a million things in between that.
Yeah, that place was fucking cool because that's when I got fired from the flower shop for waking up late and not showing up to work on time. And I had, at that point, the black in my hair had turned purple, and I had like splotches of purple in my hair, and I was like always like, fucking walking around with like some band t-shirt on. I looked like a scrub. And my mom's like, you got to get a job or I'm kicking you out of the house. If you don't have a job by the end of the day, you're either out of the house or you're shaving your head. I was like, okay. So I walked down Wellwood, just the same thing, like looking for, or I skated down Wellwood at the time. And then I ran into the McGurk brothers who were like, not many people will remember the McGurk brothers. George Reynolds will, and some other people, but they were like twin brothers from Lindenhurst that were metalheads, and they were like,
So I met them later in life. They both worked for the town of Babylon, and I worked at a beer distributor.
oh,
They would come in every day after work, and they tagged up like Misfits 2000 in a phone booth
yeah,
inside of the thing there. And Rich may have told me another story about them that I don't know if I can mention on here.
I don't know. I think they're not as cool now as they were when they were kids. They're very
Right.
Trump-tastic these days.
Sure.
So yeah, but at the time I was like, oh, these metalheads that are also into punk, and I met that, and it was either Kevin or Mike. You couldn't tell them apart. And they were like, "Oh, get a job here. This guy's cool. He's gay, and he'll hire anyone. He'll hire the weirder you are." So I went there, and they were like, "Oh, And I remember during the interview, the guys was like, "Well, and I'm gay, and I want you to know that. Do you have a problem with that?" I'm like, "My mom's gay. I don't care." And he was like, "Great." And that was it. And then I got George his job there. I think I got John a job there, and yeah, that was like they were just like really cool to us, and it was hard work, but it was a cool place to work, and the pizza was legit good. They did that sesame seed crust.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Still think about it sometimes.
And I guess my other question would be in relation to the VFW and Civic Center shows.
Yeah.
One of the first hardcore shows I ever went to. I'm a little bit younger than Vito, but it was I think Milhouse, Motive, someone else at the Civic Center.
Yeah.
I was not at that show, but there is some video that resurfaced of that, or something like a recording.
There's definitely
Please
some
explain
photos.
it for someone who had never been to a hardcore show before. I didn't know what the fuck that was. I think there was like a xylophone on stage or something.
It was a glockenspiel.
I'm sorry.
Oh, I think I have the flyer right here.
Oh yeah,
House Motive, Kill the Man in
That's right.
Questions.
We didn't plan on playing as the Black People, but we had been playing with this idea that it was funny to do a goth band that was called the Black People. So we're like, what's darker than the Black People? Like, it was like sort of like it was as stupidly obvious of a joke as it seems. So, but we were like, the songs were actually good, and we were like, wow, these are good, and we had a whole like stage outfit idea, and we were like, well, maybe we could start doing this, and maybe if we would have stuck with it, we would have changed the name or gotten more serious. But the lyrics were very like artsy, whatever. What's the band I'm thinking of? New Model Army, Bauhaus, that kind of stuff was very like that was like a de rigueur, the fucking Joy Division. So we were like, we had this whole thing, and we set up and played like 4 songs or something before the Milhouse set, and then we changed out of our clothes and played regular Milhouse show. But and then we played one other time on WUSB, like one of the guys that used to, I think it was I can't remember his name, but he was like, you guys want to play on USB? We're like, yeah. So there's a radio broadcast out there somewhere of us doing it. I don't even remember how any of the songs go or any of the songs titles, but it was kind of fun. I kind of wish we would have pursued it more earnestly than just being like a funny joke name band, but who knows?
Did anything in particular lead to the end of shows at that Civic Center, or did you just move away and stop booking shows on Long Island altogether?
Yeah, it was the latter. We never really got in trouble or anything. I think they were kind of getting cranky about, having all this violent stuff happen at the show because kids would mosh and everything. And I think, they would always have one old guy sit there and watch and make sure we didn't steal anything. And I think he might have been like telling them like, you shouldn't be doing this. But before that could happen, I was like, I'm joining Indecision and I'm just leaving this fucking island, hopefully forever. No offense.
None taken.
Well, great. So thanks for coming on. We're going to, I'll edit this into sound bites that'll get you canceled.
Black
No, but I was just wondering. So our last question on the way out, and I'm very curious about your answer to this, is if you were to tell somebody about Lindenhurst who's never been here, what would you tell them?
Oh man, it's funny. I don't know. And I remember thinking about this because I remember you asked George and you asked Vinny, and I was like, here's what I would say, and I don't remember what I would say. I know that I've been back there recently with the Ready for Death guys, my current band, and they were like, this fucking place is weird. They were just like, this is really strange. We left and they were like, I understand you so much more now. Like everybody seems to want to fight, even when they're just speaking in a friendly way. It sounds like they want to fight. And and I think it's a Long Island thing where you just kind of like women always have to worry about being harassed on the street or being assaulted, and guys similarly, not to that degree, but we basically are expecting that at some point some other guy will start a fight for no reason.
Yeah.
Or for any perceived slight, and that's just the reality. And that's kind of like they're like, oh, we get why you're fucking tense all the time now and stuff like that. So I would tell people, I guess, that have never been there, I'd say like it's a high testosterone, low self-awareness zone.
I'm putting that on a bumper sticker. That's perfect.
Uh-huh.
Just like, yeah, if you grow up in Lindenhurst and you never leave Lindenhurst, and maybe this is the case for Long Island in general, like you just kind of, or you don't travel a lot. Like my third grade English teacher, or fifth, I don't remember what grade it was, but the English teacher eventually became the principal, and he was like proud that he had lived in Lindenhurst his whole life. And I was like, no wonder you're such a demented fuck. Like you don't have any idea how anybody else lives or acts or communicates or speaks or you don't have any idea. You just live your whole life in the zoo. It's like a zoo coast. Lindenhurst is almost like there's probably other towns on Long Island that are more like perfect, like neurosis factory of humans, but like maybe like out east, like somewhere in Suffolk, but like fucking Patchogue or one of the Oggs. But like Lindenhurst, I feel like really, it's just like what was that? Was the filmmaker Tom Hartley? Didn't he set some of his
Hal Hartley?
Hal Hartley. And I remember thinking like, that's kind of weird. Why would you shoot a movie here? This place is fucking weird and shitty. Now I understand that's probably why he did it, because it's like there's no other place like it, And I'm shitting all over the whole your podcast and maybe a lot of your listeners and other guests.
No, what's funny is like everyone agreed. Like I'm sure you saw the Barbie post.
No, I haven't.
Oh, okay. We'll go look at it.
I will look at it today now. Yeah.
But it's like, John sent it to me and he's like, is this too offensive to post? I was like, dude, I laughed. And it became like our most viral post.
Yeah.
The legacy Lindenhurst leads.
Yeah. So like everyone agrees. They all know, no matter how buttoned up you are.
Right. If you come from Long Island, like, you can be earnest and I don't want to use the term politically correct, but you can be like very in tune to the realities of the world. But at the same time, you're that you're sort of grown out of this soil, which is just like this cast off detritus from New York and the five boroughs that hang loom high as the city.
Yeah,
and you sort of live in this sort of as a sort of surf, in the fiefdom, and that informs how you deal with the world. And the best coping mechanism is sarcasm, self-deprecation, ribbing your friends, insulting jokes, and that just becomes part of your DNA, and that's handed down. So I'm sure I got it from my parents and my relatives, and my kids are gonna. Wolfie's already my 7-year-old is like the most sarcastic kid, and he gets it all from me. He's like he's not like any of the other kids.
Already ball busting.
Yeah, and I'm lucky that my wife is there to kind of ameliorate that. But he's always going to be my kid, where he's just like he's already knows how to give the finger and when to give the finger and why.
Very cool. All right. Well, thanks so much for coming on, man. This was fun.
Long live the bench.